So today we're going to talk about interactive virtual, augmented, and mixed reality visual effects. My name is Vladimir Storm, and last 3 years I've been focusing on virtual, augmented, and mixed reality experiences. I've been running a meetup in Berlin called Creative VR. It's connecting artists and developers to make artistic and experimental experiences. So today I want to tell about different ideas about designing VR experiences and how the projects I was working on and the way it was made in Unity. So yeah, first of all I want to say that we live in this unique time when we can create fantasies and dreams and step into them and let other people step into them. So the first experiment I made and the first technology I was working with when I started to do virtual reality in 2016 called the ray marching. It's basically ray marching is a technique of rendering geometry, kind of like with in the old graphic cards. People use it, and I really wanted to experiment with it in virtual reality because you have kind of different way of shaping the world and show the world. Kind of not made of triangles, but out of just simple shapes. And yeah, that was quite exciting, to be honest. So I made a few experiences with that. One of them is this, is like a fidget spinner VR game. So when you rotating a spinner, the whole universe rotates around you. And the important thing about this, I made a skybox in Unity with a shader using ray marching. And the interesting thing about this in virtual reality is that it renders per eye. So the whole sky is volumetric. You cannot really see it on the screen, but once you're in a VR headset, you can see the volume and depth. And this is one of the unique qualities of virtual reality that you have to keep in mind, that when you're designing things for VR, basically the whole world is three-dimensional, and you use both of your eyes, so the feeling of depth is super important. The other super important quality of virtual reality is physical interactions. Well, we have a special part of the brain which is responsible of physical interactions when you interact with objects around you, when you interact with your body. So this wasn't presented in mediums before, even in video games. When you work with a screen, it's different. So once you do something for virtual reality, you have to keep it in mind that this is a new thing, and still a lot of things are undiscovered. Another idea I wanted to talk about is call it diverse perception design. So I've been showing some experiences on different conferences, and I saw how different people playing the experiences, and what I realized that we're all different, and we have to build experiences for diverse experiences that different people will find something for themselves. I was collaborating with a friend artist, Alvarez. She's a talented VR developer also. And we wanted to make this experience which kind of fits to different people. I mostly did it for with a man perspective, and she's from a women perspective, and I wanted to make it an abstract from both. and kind of packed both of the perceptions like into the experience. And for example, other thing is like what we noticed is when people of different age playing VR, they react differently. For example, kids, they like completely space out. Like like if you're 10 years old kid playing VR, they just do this. They completely don't understand what's going on. And then teenage guys usually just super active. They want to like interact with things around, like just want to punch things. And then like older people, mostly it depends. Some people just like to watch things around, like just space out and see the world. Other people really like to have a task. So we packed all these different perceptions into the experience that each person can find something for themselves. And this is the experience we came up with. It's called WOMP VR. It's basically abstract experience about states of life. This particular state was teenage years, when you experiment with your body, put things in your arms, like an archetype of taking drugs, and you're not sure what is going on around you, and you're exploring the world but try and fail. I used a lot of computer graphics techniques, for example, like this refraction shaders, and like the sky here is again like ray march, so it's like volumetric when you're seeing around, and this is like when you're winning. There's like liquid momcoms, which is basically reaction diffusion shader, but like you can interact with. And so we experimented with all these design techniques, kind of bringing them to life. Whoa. So like few things I want to say how it was made. For example, the ocean around, it's basically built this way. So there is a rendered texture with waves, which kind of renders the ocean waves, which is basically parallel noise with different octaves. It's called FBM noise. And it applied to the vertex deformation of a really huge plane. So basically, the ocean around you is just like a plane which deforms, and the other thing is like when you're underwater, there is like a tiny piece you can see in a corner. It's like also like you have a refraction. So when you're under the water and waves goes above you, you can see the refraction like if you were underwater. And the sky made with the ray marching. So basically, it's volumetric. Once you in VR, you see this like gooey sky, which is like shape shifting, and it gives you a feeling like of the depth also. Other thing I want to talk about is like body interaction. It's like still hugely underrepresented in VR. Like there's so few experiences when you can interact with your body. There's this idea of body domain when you like can use your hands and your body to place stuff on it. We, for example, wanted to build one experience where you're like in the alien world collecting alien eggs and put inside, you have a hole with the tentacles coming out of it, and you like can fertilize yourself, and there's like baby coming out of it and crawling on your body. There's nothing like this done, but it's really interesting because there is like so much more you can still do in VR. This is the other state you made of the idea of life stages in VR. Like when you embryo, you have this like tiny fat hands, and you interact with the egg, and you like in your mother's womb, and it's like touching the egg. This particular thing was made. It's not made with ray marching, but it's called Vertex Ray Markings. So it's not fragment ray marching, but Vertex Ray Marking. So I can explain how it works. There is, for example, you start with a sphere, like you have an object of a sphere, and then you go through all the vertices and raycast the rays into the center until it kind of matching this certain shape in the center. So you kind of squeeze this like a sphere to make this shape. So and interactions, for example, in this video, like in this experience, was made on compute shader. So basically, it's like pretty simple. There is like a compute shader pass which you like you're tracking the distance between your hand and the shape. And then once you touch the shape, you change it. And then the other pass is like just fragment shader, which is just renders the whole thing. Like, I mean, it's pretty easy to do this in Unity, this kind of stuff. By the way, like one important thing I want to mention is like responsive design in VR. I really like the idea of responsive objects in VR. Like, this is really satisfying when you, in virtual reality or augmented reality, you're touching things and you have immediate feedback, like this, for example. The good thing about this is like, yeah, again, we have a special part of the brain responsible for it. And we don't really have it in movies and in the games. So basically, people should really research more about this. I've seen people coming from a movie scene and from the game scene, and they're making VR experiences, and they don't think that much about interactivity in terms of like and physicality. But I think this is like super important difference if you compare it to the previous mediums. Like a few words about the controllers. So now we have a lot of things like exist in the market. Like crazy stuff like haptic vests and like smell generators, all sorts of things. And it's also super exciting to experiment with those. Last year I got this Knuckle Controllers from Vive, which is basically allow you to do finger tracking. And we made like with a friend this experience where you're alien in space, and you have 6-finger hands. And you like have your pad, like you have your pad blob, which you can poke, and like it makes a sound, like and this is super satisfying. You can use all your fingers, and then you're touching this virtual object, and it respond to you, and it's like really good feeling. Which is again, it's like quite hard to explain it on the screen, but once you're there, it's like it's really good feeling. So later, I was thinking to make a whole experience of, so since like it was an interactive experience, which you can make sounds, like you can produce sound, like I was thinking what would be cool to make a whole music machine which you can make music in VR. I made a workshop the other day on the conference about music, and I don't want to go too deep into it, but I want to say that the music and sounds are really important in virtual reality, because sounds are really like primitive, like primal way of giving you the information, and sound can really set you in a certain mood like really easy. It's like way easier than to use visuals, and in combination with visuals is like really strong immersive, it can build really strong immersive experiences. So I made this music machine called Reptiloid Synth. So you reptile, in space, and then you can use all these different strange instruments to make music. Basically, you're playing on this like liquid plane. You're sliding across this liquid plane with your 6 fingers, arms, and then you're controlling a surface of the planet. You're controlling like the ocean in the planet. And this whole thing was like it's real-time computer graphics. So basically, this experience, it has these 3 different elements. Like there's a sequencer with the rings. There is this blob pad, and there is like a plane you can play around with. But it's all real-time. Like the computer graphic generated on basically everything runs on Unity. Like the sound generated in Unity, real time, and the graphics as well. I will tell a bit more details. This one. Okay. Lol. So just yeah, because it's like a lot to show. So so I want to say a bit how it was made. So there are different components, there are different instruments. So there is like, for example, a sequencer is like this rings around you. You can poke them and make tiny steps. And basically, there's a blob coming around these rings. And when touch this step, it makes a sound. So you can create a drum-like loop, which kind of like a rhythm. Then you have a plane in the middle, which you can slide across, and it make also sound. And then you have a tiny blob, which you can poke, and it also makes sound. So everything is real-time generated. For example, the plane, I just wrote like Additive Synth, which is like for each of the fingers you have an oscillator. I used some pre-made synth from Kajiro, and then I modified it like towards what I'm kind of looking for. So it's like it sounds kind of like analog synth, but then you have a lot of inputs, so you can make strange sounds like you know alien. The thing is, I was surprised how fast it runs in VR. Like for example, for this plane, I used parallel mapping, which is basically on the screen you don't see that much, but basically you have this problem in virtual reality once you're using bump maps, which kind of have giving a feel of like depth. When you go to VR, they usually you see them flat because it was normally in the shader, like the normal shaders, like surface shaders, it's made for the screen basically. So on the screen you see that it's like kind of has a depth, but when you're in VR you see that it's flat. So there is this one technique called parallel mapping, which is kind of actually ray marching the depth inside the texture. So once you're in VR, you're actually seeing this plane and poke it, and it's like it has a depth. So it's like renders per eye. So you really have a feeling that it's like volumetric. And the rings, they also generate in real time. So basically, there's like a few compute shader passes, which is like renders this pipe around you, and the interactions also made with the compute shaders. So once you're just tracking each of your finger and the distance, to the ring, and then once you touch it, you make a step. It's pretty simple. Yeah, okay. I want to mention a few other things about making virtual reality fantasy worlds. I made a few other experiences. I want to mention this one, for example. I made on a jam, game jam in Berlin. Here's like you're in a toxic jungle, you're like fighting with dinosaurs. And then you have this broken soft body gun and like a laser whip. And again, I just wanted to experiment with responsive objects because they're really satisfying. Like a whip in VR is like always cool, and the soft body is like once you touch it and it completely reacts. This is the other experience. Okay, I will maybe explain it. So here is like all these shapes you can see, they have a vertex deformation. So like I wrote this one plugin basically which deforms the meshes. You have different noise types and you drop them on the meshes and they have this weird texture kind of like. Because again, I really like to explore the idea of like responsive design and VR. So it was kind of really easy way to do to do it like with the vertex deformation. So basically, once you put your hands closer to the object, it kind of distorts. So that was one of the easiest way to do it. So it's kind of giving you a feeling of responsiveness a bit, but it's pretty easy to implement. Yeah, this experience you're like exploring the ocean and you find the sea mushroom and then you're tripping, sea mushroom. This is the other one I made in a gym in Barcelona. Like I made one workshop there. So basically, this one I just want to explain a bit. Again, I'm testing here some vertex deformation shaders. So basically, all the geometry in the scene, like deforming, like in real time, so giving you a feeling that this whole space is alive. And also, like in this particular experience, we experimented with a perception system. So we hacked kind of like a SteamViewer plugin that we wanted to change the distance between the eyes. So we was thinking, what would be if you like change the distance between the eyes while you're rendering, or like what happened if you're changing a field of view while you like in VR, like if you would be an animal, you know, like because they have different field of view, they have like weird, you know, placement of the eyes, and what would be if you can, you know, pull out your eyes out of your head and look at yourself. So it's like basically in this experience you can do it. You can change all these things. You can look at yourself. You know, you can pull eyes out of your head and like look at yourself. That's pretty interesting. Yeah, and then you're seeing that you're this weird creature in a lab researching aliens. You know. So basically, this was done in like 2 days. This whole thing. Basically, I just dropped like vertex deformation noise to each object, and it's like gave this feeling of dynamic. One thing I want to mention that virtual reality and augmented reality inherits a lot of things from its ancestors: interaction design, user experience design, psychology, games, and computer graphics. And once you're coming from one particular background, it's really important to have an overview of like other things, because you can reuse already like knowledge people have in all other like fields. I think it's really important. I've seen a lot of people who are coming from one particular background, but they're making mistakes which are already solved in other fields. This is the other experience I made for the virtual gallery called Museum of Realities. It's basically also interactive experience. You're in a cave, you have a cave mom, and you can, you know, interact with it. It's basically a skinned mesh, and then you have a rig inside. And I wanted to write a compute shader that you can interact with a rig. It just was an experiment. How would it feel that you can interact with a rig on GPU? But it ended up as this trippy cave experience. And there you have these tiny worms around you, like that you can interact with. So other thing I want to mention, there's like still so many things undiscovered in virtual reality, and not just in terms of computer graphics, but in all other things. Like there's like so many ideas which you still can do. For example, I really like the idea of bringing two-dimensional visual effects to 3D domain, because there's like so many already well-known 2D effects, and you can totally rethink how you can use them for the meshes and for 3D space. One thing I'm working on right now is like content-aware scaling, but for the meshes. So basically, there's this effect I use a lot to distort like 2D images. But then I was thinking, wow, it'd be really cool to have it in you know 3D space, that you can distort 3D objects the same way, that they kind of have a reference for the content, but at the same time they're weird. Okay, I want to talk about this experience. So I had, a few months ago, I was working on this volumetric documentary called Made This Way, Redefining Masculinity, with the director from Canada, Eli Reyna. And that was a really interesting project. So basically, they already had some content, like a photogrammetry set and videogrammetry. And they wanted to make it more alive. So we talked what kind of visual effects we can use to bring more like life to the whole experience. And for example, this is one of the things, like the transition between the cutscenes. So it's like we discussed, like maybe we can, instead of turning on and off cutscenes, you can interpolate in between them. Or once you're teleporting, you can actually interact with a, with a photogrammetry model, that it kind of, you can have a feeling that you're grabbing it, it's like kind of more alive and like liquid. So this is like a prototype when you like, or like this effect was unfolding room effect. So we thought like, okay, maybe it would be really cool not to just start with a solid scene, but like, you know, like if it just unfolds, you start with nothingness and then it unfolds. And this effect was built just from the idea, and was like, it came out pretty cool. So yeah, and we put all these different effects together in the experience. So this is like one of the final tests. So you have this room, you have photogrammetry and videogrammetry cutscenes, you have unfolding room. And I used, for example, here post-processing stack, which is like super cool. Like I'm glad Unity made it like really good cinematic effects. And also like I used some fog, and like I made the shader for the sparkles in the room, so it like looks more like magical, like a dreamlike. So it's really interesting idea how you can spice up the whole scene just from the concept, like to write visual effects, kind of like to shape everything. A few words about augmented and mixed reality. So this year I'm personally like switching more for augmented and mixed reality and computer vision, and it's pretty exciting. So this year finally we have so many like headsets which finally work with AR and MR, and same concepts could be applied which work in virtual reality. They could be applied for augmented and mixed reality. Although with augmented and mixed reality, you work with the real world, so it's like it's much more you can do. This is one test. I used the same unfolding effect for my room. So it's basically interpolating between like you know, real world and digital world. So it's like you're starting with the real world, but then you're interpolating to the digital world, and you can interact with it. It's like the whole idea of mixed reality, that you go back and forth between reality and digitality. I don't know. Other thing I work on right now called soft body physics. Again, I just really love the idea of responsive objects in virtual reality and augmented reality. Everything you touch kind of respond, and you can, you know, have a feeling for it. And one of the way to go with it is like use soft body physics. Basically soft body or soft body dynamic. There are like few models how to do it. One called spring mass, which you have an object and you divide it by you divide it by small nodes. You make small nodes out of this object connected with the springs. So basically, once you touch the object, you know, it's like liquid dinosaur. So once you touch it, it kind of all this. This is the idea of like spring mass. But now I'm working on a different one called finite element method, which is like you preserve the volume actually, because after a while with this idea, it's kind of getting really trashy. So yeah, but it's really satisfying once you have ability to interact with the objects and they have immediate feedback. That's like super good feeling. Other thing I want to talk about is AI. It's a huge trend this year, and I personally, the thing is, it's really broad topic. AI is like there are so many things. I personally focused on computer vision because it's basically computer graphic programming. I'm using these things called convolutional neural networks. It's basically you can build like the whole computer vision system out of the tiny layers, like tiny shaders, which kind of feeding back and adjusting themselves to recognize certain things. And one thing I want to mention, like one of the latest projects I worked with, it's based on the idea of soft robots, which is basically you have soft body object, but then you have a tiny, like a neural network inside. So basically you have this jelly object, and you can teach it to do certain things. I have this one test I made. You have these tiny worms. They have tiny neural network inside. You teach them to fly around you. So basically, you have this intelligent digital creatures you can interact with, And yeah, this is like the research I'm working on now, like computer vision, augmented reality, and I think next few years it will be more and more interesting stuff. Yeah, that's pretty much it. You can find me on Twitter and other networks as VladStorm_. And yeah, if you have any questions, if we have time, I would love to answer. Thank you. Okay, no questions, lol. Okay.
Hi, Vlad. Thanks for the presentation. In your mixed reality experiences, which headset did you use? It looked like the Vive Pro with see-through?
Well, this is Vive Pro.
Okay.
It's a new headset from HTC.
Yes, with the stereo cameras in front.
Yeah, it has 2 cameras.
So my question would be, is it actually really stereoscopic? So if you compare it, I mean, do you have experience with other see-through devices like HoloLens?
What?
Do you have experience with other see-through devices like the HoloLens, for example? So
yeah.
How would you compare it? So is it really responsive enough, or do you get sick very easily?
I like it more than HoloLens.
Okay.
But also it's different concepts because HoloLens is augmented reality headset and Vive Pro is mixed reality. Yeah, it's almost the same, but still it's a bit different ideas.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks.
Hi. Is there any place where we can download one of your experiences to try it ourselves?
Yeah. There are some of them available online for free, and other, if you want to play any of them, just we can talk. I can just give you the builds.
Okay. Thanks.
Hi. Thanks for the talk. About one of those experiences where you experimented with changing the eye distance and things like that. What was your perception? Like, how long could people actually take this without vomiting or getting sick?
Yeah, it was interesting. It totally works in some ranges. Only one thing was like too intense when you can take both of your eyes separately in your hands and you can look like differently. That was too much. But once, yeah. So we didn't put it in the final thing. But once you take both of your eyes and you look around, it kind of works, but it feels really strange.
but doing like a horse-like experience was kind of okay-ish?
What horse-like?
A horse, like doing the eyes to the side. Was that working?
I think we didn't try that. Maybe I should. Yeah, we didn't really rotate them. We more like did like this, like the distance, and changed the field of view. But I don't think we did this. Yeah, that's a nice idea. Maybe, yeah. Second version. Okay. Okay, so if you have any more questions, just hit me up. Like, just find me after.